Hey guys, so this week we are diving into the concept of our astral network. And we started the conversation last week by understanding or just becoming more aware of how we are always communicating astrally. And we communicate primarily through our emotions and our thoughts. That's what calls things in astrally, especially in the realm of thoughts, which is the realm of programming. Thoughts are also the creative principle. They're very direct, whereas emotions are more circular and they cause more of a magnetism. Thoughts and emotions are both, the foundation of both thoughts and emotions come from beliefs. So whatever our core beliefs are is what drives our thoughts and emotions. And that's why I've had us look so deeply at what we are programmed with at the deepest level, what we believe at the deepest level, and the concept, to make it as simple as possible, is that all of us have been programmed with lack. And until we change that primary program, we will continue to create the same situations, albeit in varying degrees. So if we're aiming at changing that core program from lack to abundance, then what we think and feel as we change that program changes. And as we change our thoughts and emotions, which change our resonance and our frequency, we pull in or magnetize in things that are more for us rather than feeling like they're against us. Although remember, everything is for us because everything's teaching us. The matrix itself is always reflecting back to us our beliefs. So it's a really handy sort of biofeedback to help you see what it is that you're believing at a core level. And the reason why we need that is because we often are unaware of what our deepest programming is. So last week I had you just start paying attention to the conversation that you're having in the astrals. And remember, you're always conversing. And those thoughts and emotions are truly what is pulling things to you and repelling other things from you. We can repel opportunities and repel blessings and repel gifts and repel change out of fear and out of beliefs that we're unworthy or we're not good enough or whatever it is, any belief in lack. We can also repel curses and repel things that feel like they're against us and repel negative situations when we replace those core beliefs in lack to beliefs in abundance. And primarily from the level of a self, you as an individual self interacting with life, the more you can be, the more your beliefs can get behind you, in the sense of behind your humanity, that your beliefs are for your humanity, for your growth, for your security, for your heart primarily. The more you can be for yourself, the more you're for humanity. And what I mean by for yourself is not just that. Often in the lack matrix, it's very much that hierarchy, and it's always owned or be owned, So we often think that being for something means being for it having power over other things. That's not what I'm referring to when I'm talking about being for yourself. I'm talking about having authority over yourself. It's not authority over anything or anyone else. When we exercise that authority that we've been given over our own lives, things can change dramatically. But the reason so often most people do not exercise this authority is because they do not believe they have it. They feel owned. They believe at a core level that they are owned, that they are enslaved by the world. So that's why this has to change at a core level. And when we're breaking out of lack, what you'll find, because you've been asking at a deep level, you've been asking for healing, you've been asking for wholeness, you've been asking for blessings, you've been asking for abundance, you've been asking to get out of fear, guilt, and shame. And the universe is always responding to that asking. And part of that responding is to make you aware of what you actually believe. And that way, in the awareness, you can change the belief at a core level. So anything that you are experiencing right now in your life and the way you feel about it, how it feels and what you're thinking about it, is the closest indication. It's the most direct indication to where your programming is. And often it's right here that we go to war, because we believe if we feel something negative, or if something's happening that feels out of our control, or makes us feel powerless, or makes us feel angry, or triggers our old beliefs like we're not enough, or people don't love us, or whatever it is, we feel like we're doing something wrong, it sort of re-emphasizes that belief that we're unworthy. And then by the emotions of negativity make us feel more enslaved in that belief. So when we can change what we feel or what we think about emotions and understand that negative emotions are not against us, as I said in yesterday's video, everything is happening for us. And when we really start to look at everything like that, it starts to lighten the energy. It starts to lighten the density, and it eases our interaction with life. So it doesn't feel like we're constantly in that war and we have to put things in chokehold. Like it's like we get desperate in our fear, and we put a chokehold on others and ourselves and the planet because we're in survival. So yesterday a couple of days ago when I sent out the video on psychically connecting to your ideal audience or your ideal client or your ideal customer, particularly, I want to just emphasize that all of us have a direct calling. And it looks different for everyone. So maybe for you, it doesn't necessarily look like a client or a customer or whatever, but you are called in a very specific space. We all have very unique gifts. There's not one person on this planet that doesn't have a function, and it's an important function, and that doesn't have power in that, an authority in that area where they have their gift. The problem is that most of us don't understand what our gifts are, and we don't exercise them consciously. So often it can feel like they're working against us. And that's almost a whole other class, understanding and discerning your gifts. But what I want you to pay attention to is how you think and feel about your connection to others, because where you feel powerless and where you feel like you're not enough, and also where you may be striving, the energy of striving is a strong indication of lack, because it has that energy to have to prove. Often we spend so much time in those areas because we are exerting our energy in a way that is trying to prove that we have worth and prove that we're worthy to receive. So when I asked you to become aware of what in your past, what version of your past self, or what do you feel a genuine connection to? What do you genuinely want to connect with? What energy, what person, what conversation, what topic? Because you can expand it beyond yourself. A few of you had a difficult time with that and expressed that when you think of your past self, it's difficult for you to connect genuinely, or to not feel criticism, or to not feel a resistance. And for others of you, you're not necessarily doing life coaching or working one-on-one with people, and so you didn't know how to make it fit. So I want to expand that a little bit to topics. Like I said, what topics, what conversation, what interests you, and most importantly, what is your soul longing to be a part of? What do you feel like you genuinely want to move towards? And then paying attention to how you feel about that when you think about connecting with that thing, that person, that past version of you, that conversation, that particular energy field, that particular realm of creation. However you feel about that, if you pay attention to where you feel excited, where you feel resistant, where you feel negative energy, all of that is going to show you where your blocks are. And one of the things that I find is really powerful For example, someone in the Facebook group was talking, specifically voicing the tendency to feel very negative about her past self, and that in any version of her past self that she tried to connect to, she felt this sort of criticism. And I thought this was a perfect opportunity to illustrate why it's so important that anything that we're attempting to connect with, anything, any realm, any topic, any energy, that we connect from a space of the heart. Because if we just attempt to go in with the mind alone, remember how we've talked about the mind does not have the ability to discern apart from the heart. So imagine that your future self right now, imagine that you called in your future self and you asked your future self to help you where you are. You tuned into your ideal, the future you that is thriving, that is at peace inside, that is free of the war of lack, and that is truly abundant, that believes that it has worth. That version of you believes it has worth and understands the worth of humanity. Now imagine you called that version in to help you where you're at, and that version, instead of connecting to your heart, just judged you without connecting to your heart, without looking at your heart, without tuning into your heart, just from a critical mindset, wanted to fix everything that was wrong with you, wanted to point out what was wrong and how you needed to fix it. What would happen in that energy is it would not feel like it was you, for one, because your heart recognizes its own signature. So there's something in that feels unfamiliar. And when we're looked at with that unfamiliar eye, remember how I talked about not allowing anything to look at you if it doesn't have access to the heart, not connecting with things, not listening to advice from people, not listening to criticism from people or things or anything that's not seen from the heart and that's not connected to your heart. But what happens when we do this, when we look at ourselves with judgment, without discernment, without connection to the heart, is that energy feels unfamiliar because the heart's not open. Remember, the heart is the source of all life. And what that does is make us feel insecure. Now remember, our grid, our whole electromagnetic field, is influenced by how secure we feel. When we feel secure, when we feel safe, when we feel confident, that's when our resonance is really powerful. And we have larger territory energetically, and we call things to us more quickly and more directly. We connect to the direct needs of the heart. And that's when life really starts feeling effortless. But when we feel insecure, we don't feel safe. What happens is we go into that survival mode. It by default puts us more in the mind because there's not that connection to the heart. And so then we go into the mind and then we judge ourselves and then we feel insecure. So we start going back into that striving, proving energy, which is directly connected to lack. And this is the energy of how business has been ran, not just business, but life in general has been ran on this planet for centuries. So the idea of having a psychic connection to yourself and the idea of true abundance really means, remember that we are always being restored, and that time is not linear, it's cyclical, and that all conversations, the idea of past and present, are really just concepts, but it's all happening now. So as you listen to your heart now and tune in now to what your heart needs, now is your most palpable, direct access to what you truly need. So when we tune out of our hearts, we by default actually disconnect from what we truly need. We disconnect from discernment. And this is why we make decisions that are out of alignment with our thriving. Because when we make decisions purely from the mind, it's not that we don't use the mind and our logic, and I'll get to that in a minute, but when we make decisions purely from the mind, we are not connected to the heart and therefore the actual reality of the life force within us. And so then we make decisions that don't include the heart. And rather than it making us feel more alive and more open, it usually makes us feel more insecure and more closed off. So when we think about opening a connection to our past self and to our future self, which is the key to abundance, we are always blessing our past and making room for a future in which we have more abundance, more security, more connection, more confidence. And opening that up means that's really lining your now up, that your main priority of now is to feel secure. And we feel more secure when we can overcome the beliefs and the trauma of our past, and when we can bless the future. Because in this moment, remember, this moment is always our pivotal, it's always pivoting us towards a specific experience based on what we're thinking and feeling and believing. So the more secure we feel in the now, the more stabilized our energy field becomes, the more stabilized our resonance becomes, and therefore the more stable our future becomes. The more stable our health becomes, the more stable our line becomes, and the more stable our past becomes, because our past is happening now. Our past is constant information, just like the DNA, about where we've been and where we're going. And the more that we can assimilate the information and the knowledge from the past and learn from it, that opens up the door to our future. But if we don't ever get the lesson from the past, we keep creating the same experiences, and therefore our future is going to look very similar to our past, and often the lessons are bigger and more dramatic and have far more reaching consequences. Excuse me. So considering all that, I want you to think about what your relationship is with your past, which is what I asked you to do last week, and ask yourself where you feel that resistance and where you feel closed off, and therefore what you need. What does your heart need? And what I suggested to the person in the Facebook group who brought up this question is, rather than thinking of your past self as someone you need to fix and change and judge, like I said, how would it feel if your future self were doing that to you now? You would be closed off to it, because criticism and judgment does not feel good, and the heart will not open to it. We get defensive, we close up. That's just how it works, because it is not safe. So rather than that, what we are actually doing is connecting to our past self to have them inform us. Because often in moments of trauma or things we experienced, we had to disconnect. We had to disassociate. But the heart still had its experience. The mind just disassociated from what that experience was. So when we make a conscious connection to our past self, what we're doing is opening up the conversation with our heart for the purpose of understanding what it really is feeling, what it really needs. So in other words, it's us that need our past self, not the other way around. We need the wisdom of our past self. We need to know actually what our past self felt. It's important that we open the space so that our past self feels more secure, because it is the reason why lack continues to persist is because we haven't healed the past insecurity. We haven't healed the past trauma. And I'm speaking collectively right now, because obviously we've all done our own work in this in individual ways. And some things we have definitely healed. But I'm saying this as an illustration to what I mean when I talk about connecting to your past. The purpose of that is to create more security. And to create that security, we have to have the heart. So the past is our indication of where we shut off our connection to the heart. And that's our direct line back in. And as we understand what our past self felt and what it went through and what beliefs it picked up, that informs what we need in the present moment and how our present moment can shift that. So I truly believe that tapping into the energy and the matrix of abundance is opening up that portal, so to speak, between your past and your future, and allowing the now to continually bless it, continually heal the past through always connecting to the heart, and what you didn't get in the past, continually moving towards it, moving towards more security, energetically, emotionally. moving towards more confidence. So this requires us to have discernment. It requires us to tune into the heart instead of numb out to the heart. And then when it comes to the future, it's about allowing our consciousness to build it. And this involves us blessing our future by envisioning and imagining and connecting with the energy that supports us. Again, this goes back to discernment. So making decisions in the now that secure our future. And when we're stuck in beliefs of lack and trauma and that we're not enough and there's not enough and all the things, or a big one for a lot of us is that the world's not safe. You may think you're fine and that you trust your intentions, but you don't trust other people. But remember, when it comes to the programming, the subconscious mind does not know the difference between what you think about yourself or what you think about others. So if you truly at a core level believe other people are not safe and they're bad or they're evil or they're just confused or they're whatever, you hear all the stuff people say about humans and others, including me. I've said it and I've done it and I've felt it. But your subconscious mind thinks you're talking about yourself, because it knows you are ultimately one and the same as the other. So to me, it doesn't matter whether you believe it's you that's unworthy or other people that are unworthy. We've got to settle this idea of not being worthy, because if by believing that, we're enforcing lack and we're enforcing a hierarchy and we're enforcing this idea that you have to prove to me that humans are worthy or I'm not going to bless them. Prove to me that. Do you see that? It's that energy of judgment. And it comes from the mind being disconnected from the heart, not actually having a clear signal and a clear connection. But as soon as we open the heart and connect to it, the mind sees clearly what's needed. It's just like when have you ever had the experience where you've been angry at someone and you've kind of energetically been fighting with them, or maybe physically, not physically, but like in your words, fighting with them and frustrated and hurt. And then there's a turning point at which that person that you're so angry at finally opens up their heart and shows their humanity and says, you're right. I did do that, or whatever. And they open up their heart. They allow themselves to be vulnerable. And it's almost like instantly it diffuses the war. Because instantly you see yourself in them. You see their humanity, and therefore you see yourself. And the heart is the expression of our humanity. The heart is the expression of our soul. So when we recognize the heart, it opens us up, and it opens up that trust. And that's why so many people never get here, because we're afraid to be vulnerable because we don't feel safe. And in yesterday's video, when I talked about triggers, and how most people don't know how to deal with triggers. And most people don't understand that triggers are actually a tremendous opportunity to quantum leap, because triggers are opening up those areas where we've been numbed. That's why it feels so scary, because we feel strong sometimes when we've numbed ourselves out and we cannot give a damn. But when we get triggered and all of a sudden we realize we do give a damn, and we feel vulnerable and we feel angry or we feel scared or we feel insecure, and then we don't know what to do with that, and our ego sort of scrambles to feel safe again, and it scrambles in that dynamic of the victim, aggressor, savior. So it's scrambling to figure out who's bad, who's good, who's right, who's wrong, where am I safe, where do I have authority to point at someone else and blame them so that I don't feel like I'm the one being looked at and blamed, because someone has to be unworthy, and it can't be me, because if it's me, I won't survive. Or if it is me, then I have to grovel and I have to give other people my power so that I can be worthy again. It is extremely detrimental energy, and it truly is the energy of enslavement. And it's how the lack matrix functions. It's how programming functions in that matrix. So remember, fear, guilt, and shame control it. And when we're triggered, if we can step back, and if we can observe our emotions without judgment, allowing all of them to come through, no matter if they're negative or positive, but observe it without taking action and without directing our intention or our fear towards another, but just pull it back. Because often what we do when we're triggered is we strongly project, or strongly just like pull away, like bolt. And it's felt on the astrals. And what happens, because triggers happen in relationships. Relationships are how we build our abundance. The stronger our relationships are, the stronger our abundance is going to be, because the more secure our grid feels. So when we're triggered and we go to war, our whole grid feels more insecure, because all of a sudden it's like those fault lines are all having a mini earthquake, and nothing feels quite safe in those moments. And if we can be present to that tremor in the same way that a woman, in order to soothe her contractions when she's in labor, she's got to be present to them, breathe into them, relax rather than try to fight it. The more a woman fights and resists the contractions, the worse they are and the more they hurt. And the more it can feel like her body is completely against her. But the more we can be present to the contraction, the more we can be present to the energy and just relax in it, soothe it, observe it, not go to war with it. The more we can stay grounded, the more we soothe the contraction. And it doesn't mean it's not pressure, and it doesn't mean it's not uncomfortable, but it does mean that it soothes the energy around it. It soothes the coming of whatever's coming. And when you ask for abundance, you're asking for something to be birthed in your life, something to come in. So that means something's going to leave. It has to leave. And that thing that's leaving are all your survival mechanisms that you've had in lack, all our ways of how we've related to people. This is specifically it. It's relationships. And that's why I'm focusing so much on relationships in this course. Because if we get it here, this is where we get it at the primary programming level. This is where we get it in our resonance. And if we shift it here, everything can shift massively and quickly. But it's a matter of practicing, staying present, and then using our discernment. So when you're triggered, whether it's with a person or with a topic going on in your life or anything happening, think of it as this is a massive opportunity to shift programming. It's such a golden opportunity for you to see more deeply into your programming, because your heart's open and you're able to look at what it actually needs, where you actually feel insecure. And rather than judging yourself, which is often what we do, we either bolt and then we try to protect ourselves, and then we usually feel judgment towards ourselves a little bit, or judgment towards the thing that triggered us, and we kind of build up a barrier against it, and that makes us feel temporarily safe, but it doesn't ultimately heal the core issue. It just causes another barrier. But when we're present to it and we know that, okay, my primary objective here is to feel more secure. So this is giving me an opportunity, this trigger, to see where I am insecure, where my grid is insecure, where my relationships are insecure, where I don't feel safe. And this is definitely related to something from my past, because it's showing you a pattern. It's showing you, it's an echo of a program that has been accepted in your subconscious mind as truth. So if we can use these opportunities of these triggers as a gold mine, and we actually stay